Well, hey there, Dr. Brad Robison. Thank you so much for joining us from Brad Robison, MD and Associates. This is another episode of The Compass, and it's just been so amazing as we're releasing these episodes to see the hundreds of people that are coming to the channel and getting content. And just as you and I were in conversation in the past couple of weeks talking about, well, what kind of content are we really dreaming about being able to put out to resource some of those people we have in our mind who's consuming this, but also just the general population. One thing that you said is really on your heart to talk about is just making it through the holidays. And this is a time where stress is at an all-time high. And even as you're saying that, I'm thinking about how families try to sometimes keep up with the Joneses a little bit, and inflation means our dollar's not going as far as it did last year around this time. And we have a cultural busyness attached to sort of the seasonality of what we're doing right now. And so I'm sure you're having patients come in and you're having to have some conversations with them. What's your thoughts on this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know it's a common thing to talk about, and I'm not saying that I've got any better answers than anybody else out there on the internet with it, but I do want to at least acknowledge and discuss some of those things that, yeah, the busyness of the season, the demands, the realities of the financial demands that are more evident, and those are real things. I mean, I had somebody just earlier this week that was in here, and she was talking about that for her husband and two kids, that it's going to be a lot more scaled back Christmas than her kids have ever experienced before. And she was talking about her daughter was
Yeah.
her so because they were kind of trying to prepare the kids. I think her daughter was 11, I think, something like that, and they were trying to prepare the kids a little bit. And her daughter was like, "So, does this mean we're poor?" And she's like, "Well, no, I mean, not
Maybe, no.
maybe." but I mean, so I mean, I realize, I just use that as an example to say that I realize that those are conversations that parents
Yeah.
are having with their kids, because the economy is not what it was, and people are feeling a little bit more of the financial strain, and so there are probably more of those conversations going on this year with kids, on top of the already just busy schedules and trying to keep up with the Joneses and trying to get everything in. And so that's a very real part of the holiday stress at this time.
Yeah. And I think too, that stress on top of, just people that may even have some other things going on in their life,
Sure.
on top of sort of the cultural busyness and families wanting to make this meaningful. What's your steps for, some people that even, and maybe you can differentiate some of it too, just from your perspective, like people with diagnosis that you're working through or with, um, is this time more difficult for them? I think I'm
Sure.
curious about that a little bit.
Sure.
And then
Sure.
how does this affect maybe some healthier patients, like the parents or families that are coming in? And is there seasonal stuff that comes on them
Sure.
too? Like, walk me through that, because I'm genuinely
Yeah.
curious about that divide.
Yeah, I think part of the issue there is, and that's something that maybe I can add a little bit. And again, not that there aren't others that have some of that insight, but like at one level, the stuff I was talking about, a lot of people have good insight on about like what it takes to just have a healthy family Christmas, and
Yeah.
uh, the mom and the daughter, talking with them about just creating memories together as a family that aren't necessarily financial, that aren't requiring a big financial thing. So like that's kind of just the thing that we all have to address right now, is how do we create just meaningful family memories, which become the traditions that ground our children, that
Mhm.
so that's a whole topic we could talk about that everybody has to deal with. But then there is the reality that this time of year, you know seasonal affective disorder is a real biological thing, and now, I mean, certainly some people are stressed this time of year because of the normal life stressors, but then there really is a neurobiology to, worsening mood for people that do have that, a major depressive disorder. And so they're trying to do the same things we're all trying to do, right? They're trying to, have a good family Christmas. They're trying to create good, traditions and leave good kind of memories and legacy for their kids. And then they're doing it when maybe they're not at their best, maybe at their worst, in fact, through the whole year with their biologic mood. And so that's a real challenge this time of year for people. And I think just acknowledging it, I think even acknowledging it within your family. I mean, there's a fine line when it comes to sorting through that with your kids. If you're a parent that's got seasonal affective disorder, you don't want the legacy that your kids remember that, dad's always, depressed and always uses that as an excuse, so it's not like you're wanting to constantly talk with your kids about your depression, but I think you can at least acknowledge that, hey, there's this thing, and you can kind of educate kids a little bit about it. And if kids understand it, and then they see you genuinely trying to do your best to overcome it and make good memories for the family, then I think kids are really, very understanding of that and very.
I love it. I love that, the idea of having those conversations with kids, because I think as a parent, I can understand how it might be very difficult to understand, well, what should I say? What shouldn't I say? When do I cross a line? What is that barrier? And it probably exists differently in every single family, but do you have any guidelines on those, like parent communication against some of these deeper topics?
Yeah, I think it does kind of depend, it varies with families and it's kind of, there's not a real hard line that you can draw there, but I think it does, the conversation to have with your kids about mood disorder, if you're a parent that's struggling with a mood disorder that's worse this time of year, I think the conversation to have with them is to acknowledge the obvious, and things are more obvious to kids than we parents sometimes want to believe. So you kind of have to be able to go, okay, I would like to think that my kids aren't noticing, but they probably are. So acknowledge the obvious, and then help the child understand kind of the facts of it. In other words, it's okay to talk about, you don't have to give tons of details about major depression or seasonal affective disorder, but it's okay to talk about, hey, here's what's going on. I see a doctor. If you're seeing somebody, I see a doctor about this, and here's the things that are going on, so that the child has an explanation for what they are already observing, so that you're acknowledging the obvious. And then I think the other side of that's really important is that the child also see you making a genuine effort to still overcome it and to be engaged with the family as best you can, because it's that, that then creates connection with your kids around a real genuineness. That's true for all of us as parents. I mean, we don't have to be perfect in the eyes of our children. In fact, I could argue that that's maybe not the best. I mean, for the same reason that I'm just talking about, like kids, if I'm going around parenting as if, I don't want my child to know that I'm not perfect, then I'm already parenting in a very disingenuous way, because trust me, my kids know I'm not perfect, so, they're realizing something's out of sync here.
Yeah.
So we all have that struggle. And I think that we want to parent from a place of genuineness, but also from a place that is genuinely putting our kids' needs first. It's like, okay, yeah, I have this problem. I'm sharing it with you because I know you can see that I'm struggling here, but it's not your job to fix dad. And I'm still going to do the best I can to, be there for you and to make this, make this. Lost you there for a second.
Yeah, you're back.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know if you lost the audio there
You
too.
said I'm doing the best to make this.
Yeah, doing the best to make this Christmas great. That you're letting your kids know, yeah, I'm not perfect, but I'm doing the best to make this time together meaningful, and I'm doing the best to really, to put you first and make this a good experience for you. And so I think that's what we do.
Oh, I love that. One thing that I'm thinking about too, as you're talking about this, is just a situation that happened in my own family actually last fall, which I'm very close with my cousins and their family. And it was right when the Delta variant was like through the roof. And
Yeah.
so he got COVID and was hospitalized, but they were just totally out of space. And so he was in the ER for like 8 days, and they put him like in a closet. And you're an ER doctor, so you just know, like, golly, it's probably the wildest time. Before you was a psychiatrist at one point, weren't you an ER doctor?
Yeah, I worked well. Yeah, I did pediatric emergency department some. Yeah.
They basically like put him in a closet, and he didn't have any care other than my cousins. And they were given one meal a day. They were just overstaffed and, or understaffed and overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And by the time he ends up getting into the ICU, it was just too late. He ends up passing away. And it was such a traumatic experience for our family because we were in the hospital with him. We couldn't leave the hospital. Because if we left, we couldn't go back in. But if we didn't stay there, he wasn't getting proper treatment. We weren't even in a room. It was like we were in a room with a chair. There wasn't even a bed in there. It's just a really difficult situation. And he ends up passing away in the ICU after 8 days of being in the ER. And then when birthday and Christmas and Thanksgiving rolled around the first go, we were almost like still so stuck in that we weren't able to process the holidays. And then this year is really the first year where, like, wow, this is weird without him as a part of sort of the family stuff. And I know we're not the only family in America that's having to deal with that. There's so much loss during COVID, and it sort of dysregulated all of those family functions, and death and loss at the holiday time is worse. And just a man in my church lost his dad yesterday, and he emailed me and asked for prayers and all that. And I sent out prayer requests to a few different people. And one of the people responded and said, I know how hard it is to lose a parent around the holidays. And so can you talk about that a little bit, grief and loss, and how to navigate through that at this time of the year?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's such a key thing as well. I mean, individually navigating that is hard enough, and then trying to navigate that as a family with kids, or that sort of thing, and being attentive to the kids and being attentive to your own grief. And I think a lot of it is, again, sort of like I was saying about like seasonal affective disorder or those sort of things. I think that's a good theme today, that it, is the idea that, acknowledging what is obvious to, like, you don't have to like overburden kids, because, that acknowledging what is obvious helps you. If you stop and think about it, it helps you navigate developmental age, right? Because what's obvious to a 3 or 4 year old isn't the same as what's obvious to an 8 or 9 year old. But the principle's still the same. If you're kind of in tune with your kid, you'll begin to pick up on, I can tell they're aware of this, or they're grieving. They're aware of the family grief and the changes that this has caused, and how we're doing things. We're not doing, Thanksgiving. We're not doing Christmas the same this year. It's different. And so really acknowledging what is obvious and giving that space to, talk about it. Every family does that differently. I mean, it may be talking about it, like sitting around and sharing emotions and stories and talking about it. It might be, doing something, being
Yeah.
together and, going outside and doing something. But it's finding ways to connect and to be together and acknowledge the things that are obvious. Um, and then I was just talking with somebody about that this week that's going through a loss this time of year and kind of trying to sort all of that out. And we were talking about that it's okay to recognize and feel the emotions of grief, the ups and the downs, the shock, the anger, the hurt, the
Yeah.
sadness, the denial. It's okay to feel those emotions of grief. And it's okay to not feel them. That's something that, because everybody's on the internet says, oh, it's okay to feel your feelings. Okay. Well, yeah, I absolutely agree. It's what I do. I absolutely agree. But it's also okay to not, to
Yeah.
a point, like it's okay. This was the conversation I was having with this person. It's like, we were talking about, the wall that they're putting up. And I'm like, like this Christmas, it's probably okay to put up a pretty good sized wall
Yeah.
around some of your emotions. Know that it's there, know the wall's there, know that you're kind of compartmentalizing things. But this Christmas, it's probably okay to put up a pretty big wall, and so that those emotions aren't just
Yeah.
overwhelming you. But then next Christmas, it will be a little different. Well, through the whole year until next Christmas, it'll be different. But next Christmas, there'll be some emotions and some thoughts and memories, but there'll be other things, and with this person, what we were talking about is that it's okay to talk about, share stories with the family, like at Christmas, at the Christmas gathering. It's okay to share stories with the family about the loss, and about how you're feeling, because they're going through the same things. And so you guys as a family may get together and shed some tears, but you also may tell some funny stories.
Yeah.
You may get together. Oh yeah, I remember when Dad did this, and there'll be some tears shed, and then there'll be some laughter and all that. And that's what I mean by it's okay not to feel, though, Tyler. I hope I'm being clear on that, because because this was the whole conversation I had with this person this week. Don't feel like you have to get together and tell all those stories when it's real fresh. I mean,
Right. That's good.
it's real fresh right now. It's real hurtful. It's real painful, really overwhelming. So it is okay to have a bit of a wall up, but then over time,
Yeah.
I always say you want to make sure that you're not making that wall permanent, that you've
Right.
got windows and doors in that wall where you can start kind of checking with your emotions behind there, and other family members, your kids can start checking their emotions behind their walls. And then there's communication, new traditions that come out of that, new memories that come out of that. And that's
Yeah.
what helps people, I think.
And it sounds like you're saying, it's okay during the holiday season to make it a pause, but it's not a stop. We're hitting
Yes.
pause, we're not hitting stop. And there's a distinction there. And because that's one of the things as you're talking that I thought, well, how many people have delayed grieving versus seasonal affective disorder?
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know what the percentages
How
are.
could you know that, right?
Probably somebody has studied that. I don't know what the percentages are on that, but I'd say there's an element of that probably a lot. I mean, there I definitely see people that have neurobiologically based seasonal affective disorder that really, I mean, I have one lady that, gosh, I've worked with her now for 25, 30 years, something like that. Functions incredibly well. I mean, we see each other a couple times a year, but she goes back on her Prozac in the end of September, and we'll come in and chat about it. She goes on her merry way. We're, in her situation, it's clearly not, it's just random biology. It's just the biologic rhythms. But there's a lot of folks that you can't it's hard to tease that apart, that there may be some biology depression, but there's law, because we all eventually are dealing with loss, and that's a reality that we deal with. And so there is a big part of seasonal affective disorder. I mean, there's a big part of the holiday blues that are related to losses that we know about.
Yeah.
And losses, like, now again, that gets a little bit of, psychiatrists, like, thinking, but there is some truth to it. I think that, what I mean by losses that we know about versus those, I guess, that we don't is if we built walls up with no windows and doors at all,
yeah,
then we may be having seasonal affective disorder, but not really acknowledging that the core of that is coming from some losses that we've had that we just have carried.
That's what I was thinking. Like, you can possibly get stuck in that grief, right? Or stuck in that cycle.
Oh, yeah.
And then, so what do you do? How do you dismantle some of those bricks to get the wall down?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's a challenge. I think one of the things that when the emotions are kind of, finding their way out, because they do, when the emotions are finding their way out, giving yourself permission to kind of sit with it. The visual metaphor there is like when a chink happens in the mortar between a brick, and there's some emotion, some sadness or some hurt that's oozing out there, rather than just filling that chink up right away, kind of let yourself be aware. Okay, wait a minute. Why is that there? What's that telling me? Why is that there? Maybe even kind of pull that brick out a little bit and be like, okay. Now, of course, you want to do that when it's safe to do that. Like I said, there are times that it may truly feel overwhelming. And so you want to do that when it's safe to do that. But you pull that brick out and you sit with that emotion. You're kind of there with it. You're aware of it. You acknowledge it. Listen to what it has to tell you. I know it's kind of a typical psychiatry thing to say in some ways, but there's some real truth to that. Listen to what it has to tell you. And that, to me, that touches on something else. And I don't think it may initially, but stick with me, here, because it may initially feel like I'm making a hard turn on our, on the topic.
I'm with you.
To me, that touches on the real kind of core of Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
Because the real core of Christmas is, I hope everybody has a wonderful Christmas and has a great celebration and with their family and lots of joyous times. But the real core of Christmas is Emmanuel, God with us. Well, that's God with us in this messed up, jacked up world that we live in. It's God with us right in the middle of our losses and our depressions and our hurts and our angers and frustration. It's God with us. And the reason why that's important, like if you've built some walls around things, leave the walls up. If you can go on and live your life and not ever have any problems and leave the walls up, great. Leave the walls up. But if that pressure's building and that wall's crumbling and a lot of those emotions are coming out, you got to build some windows and doors. You got to listen to what's back there, because Emmanuel is back there.
Yeah.
Emmanuel is God with us back there. You've probably walled off some really important things about your relationship with God, about hope, about, because you've walled stuff off that was overwhelming, and you've kind of lost hope that it can be dealt with in any other way than just buried. But no, there's hope, there's joy in the loss, but behind the wall.
Yeah.
That's Emmanuel. That's the real message of Christmas.
That's really powerful. That's really powerful. It's like, yeah, it's joyous. Emmanuel with us, God in flesh. But beyond that, it's God with us in the mess, God with us in the mud, God with us in the seasonal affective disorder, God with us in the diagnosis, and
Yeah.
God with us in the loss and the grief. That's really powerful.
Yeah. 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 That's the message. To me, that's the message of Christmas, and that's the message of Christmas for so many folks that I see that are grappling and not even sure where God's at. You know, they're just like, I don't even know. Well,
Mhm.
okay, I'm not here to tell you to preach at you. That's not my job. I'll leave that to preachers and other people. But that's not my job. My job is to just sit with you and help you kind of pull out those chunks in the wall, start creating some windows and doors. But when that happens, some interesting things start happening where people start going, oh, okay, there really is more going on than just that hurt, just that trauma, just that loss, just that suffering. There really is more going on. Yeah, there really is.
How is our spiritual being and our emotional being intertwined?
Um, well, that's a good question. We could write books on it, but but aside from academically tackling it, let me think if I can depict it, because I just had this conversation yesterday with a young lady who's would not at all acknowledge any kind of faith or religion or belief in God, but I've been working with her for a bit now, and she's had some trauma and she's had some loss, and she was at a place where she was beginning to realize um, that that she was beginning to realize the I ams instead of the I am nots is what the phrase that we were talking about. But what that was about in this metaphor was the truth about herself as she knew it and the world for the last several years is that she's a mess and horrible and terrible, and the world is a mess and horrible and terrible, and bad things happen. That's the truth. And so the I am not good enough, I am not safe enough, I am not da 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 da. And then the wall that got built around all of that was a lot of masks and facades and all that. And so it's like part of the mask was I can do it, and I in this angry, hostile facade. But the pivotal thing yesterday was when she was beginning to realize, oh, wait a minute, that's just a reaction to my real belief about the I am nots.
Mm-hmm.
And then she began to glimpse, and she's beginning to glimpse this now for a little bit now, but it kind of crystallized yesterday. Oh, wow, maybe there really is a truth. Like she was feeling it in her, behind the wall.
Yeah.
That there really is something of value and worth about who she is. And to me, Tyler, when that starts happening, that's right at the interface of your question about the spirit and the mind and the emotions and all that. Right at that interface there, where when people begin to glimpse the I ams, and they're beginning to realize that it's not something that they create. It's not a facade that I create, that I can do this, that, and all that. No, it's like if I got my hands on the controls here, I'm going to screw this up.
Yeah.
But yet, I do have value and worth. I am loved. I mean, that's also Emmanuel, God with us, right? That's the reality of that love relationship that God is pursuing and inviting us all into.
Wow. Well, that's very powerful. And we've had an amazing conversation today. We're running out of time. I didn't know if there was anything else you wanted to add to cap off the conversation.
Yeah, I, I, the only thing I would add to any of that, like kind of this deeper place that we ended on, the only thing I would add to that too is, now don't get me wrong. I mean, I am very appreciative for great intellectual thinkers about all of these things. But the thing that I would add for individuals that are just trying to live their life and get through the holidays with some loss or grief is you don't have to think your way there. Um, do the best you can, live your life. Don't let despair, win. Don't believe everything that the shame-based kind of stuff or the despair tells you. Um, when you get glimpses of something loving and good, linger there. Just kind of sit in it like a warm ray of sunlight in a downpour. Sit in it. It's going to get bigger. That ray of sunlight is going to get bigger. It's going to get bigger.
I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah.
I agree. It's going to get bigger. It's going to get better. Hope is on the way.
Yeah.
And it's okay to hit the pause. It's not okay to hit the stop. A
Yeah.
wealth of information today. Thank you, Dr. Brad, for joining us. If you're interested in learning more about Dr. Brad, you can go to bradrobinsonmd.com, or you can call us if you want to make an appointment, 573-334-7055. Thank you for joining us on another episode of The Compass.